Hello YouTube and welcome back to another Dare to Game video. Today we're playing Mountain Blade Bannerlord and we're doing another skill guide. This one is going to be for the Endurance attribute. So as you can see here for Endurance, we have Endurance is the ability to perform taxing physical activity for a long time. The skills that are bound to Endurance are Riding, Athletics, and Smithing. Three of the probably, I mean it's hard to say, there's definitely different schools of thought on this, but very, very important skills in the game. So increasing Endurance makes it easier to learn bound skills and also raises their learning limit. Pretty straightforward, like most skills in the game. So basically what I'm going to do through this is I'll go through, and if there's one that's definitively better than the other one, I'll point that out for the options you can pick. Perks, I like to call them. And if not, if there's just one's a horse apiece, which often is the case, I'll explain why I go with one over the other and what play styles maybe the other one would be a better option for. This is definitely something that's been requested on several of my videos, so I'm going through and doing each attribute one at a time. I've already done Vigor and Control, so let's get through Endurance. And we're going to start with Riding. So for Riding, you have the first one is Vigorous. You don't have a choice here. It just gives you a 6% boost to horse hit points. Useful skill. Then after that we have an option between spare arrows and spare throwing weapons. So this one gives you a boost. You're going to have +3 arrows to your quivers when you enter battle on horseback. So with this one to be in effect, you actually, you have to have a horse equipped and enter battle with it. And same goes for the throwing weapons, but this one gives you one more throwing weapon. So there's two things to think of here. A, it really matters what you prefer to use, if you want to use throwing weapons or archery. Obviously, if you only use throwing weapons, this one's not a better perk because you're not going to need more arrows, you need more throwing weapons. But that being said, quantifiably, 3 arrows beats 1 throwing weapon, especially if you are doing archery a lot, because you're going to be accurate, they're going to do high damage, and potentially you could take out 3 enemies, whereas with this, best case scenario, you only take out 1. So spare arrows is the way to go in my opinion. I mean, as you can see, I have throwing weapons on here, so there's a logical disconnect there, but we'll move on. Squires or Sharpshooters. So with Sharpshooter, accuracy is improved by 15% while on horseback. Useful, especially if you're going to do archery a lot. Squires gives you +2 to party size. So the reason I went with Squires here is because I needed a couple extra people in my party, and it made sense at the time. That being said, if you're doing a lot of archery on horseback, Sharpshooters is definitely the better perk. The next two options are Cavalry and Mounted Archer. So for Mounted Archer, you get a 10% less penalty to ranged weapons on horseback. So again, if you're going to be doing archery or throwing on horseback, this is a good one to go with. Cavalry gives you a 10% less penalty to melee on horseback. Now the reason I go with Cavalry in this is because, generally speaking, when I go into a battle, the first thing I do is, whether I have throwing weapons or bow, is I run around and I skirmish and I pick off some enemies that way, and then I switch over to my melee weapon. So the reason I like this perk is because when I'm up close and personal, unless you're doing charges and swings, which can be inaccurate and can often miss your target, you're kind of stopping and you do way less damage. So reducing your penalty for melee is, for my playstyle, more beneficial. But like I said, I could understand why people would want, less of a penalty for archery if they're playing as a skirmisher. So next two options are Crossbow Expert and Bow Expert. So this is going to come down to personal choice again. For Bow Expert, you use any bow on any horse, and crossbow related any crossbow, or reload any crossbow on horseback. So these ones are going to coincide with 2 skills from the bow and crossbow, where they allow you to use any bow on horseback or reload any crossbow on horseback. And so this will come down to, are you going to use crossbows more often or bows? For me, it's bows. I don't like crossbows. So definitely Bow Expert is mine, that's my opinion. Next we have, all the rest of them don't have an option, so we'll just burn through them. Horse Grooming says production of horse farms is increased by 50%. Good skill. It's going to help you, get more horses in your economy and be able to recruit more cavalry. Then you have Conroy, which gives you +4 to party size. Trampler, which gives you a 50% to charge damage, can be very useful. Iron Steed, horse becoming lame when wounded in battle chance is reduced by 50%. Definitely useful. Don't want to always be laming up your good, valuable horses. Filled to the Brim increases the carry capacity of pack animals by 20, so that's useful. And Nomadic Traditions increases the party speed bonus of your mounted troops by 30%. So that one's going to make your over-the-map travel much quicker, so that's very good. So let's move on to Athletics. So for Athletics, the first option is extra arrows or extra throwing weapons. So again, this is going to come down to personal preference. Are you going to use throwing weapons, or are you going to use arrows? In this playthrough, I was going for arrows, even though, like I said, I have throwing weapons on me. So I went with this one. Plus, as I've said before, if you're just doing the math, this gives you 1 more throwing weapon. If you start the battle on foot, now mind you, you can't have a horse if you want this one to take effect. You have to be on foot, so, take that with a grain of salt. But again, 2 versus 1. So quantifiably, arrows are going to be better than throwing weapons unless you're only using throwing weapons. So the next option is close quarters training or range training. So range training gives you +2 range damage on foot, and close quarters training gives you +2 melee damage on foot. The reason I go with close quarters training in this case is on foot, I'm generally using a sword. I like to use my ranged weapons on horseback, and I'll sometimes use them on foot, but they're pretty deadly. They're arguably much more deadly than melee weapons, unless you're hitting exactly right and the person isn't very well armored, and etc. So I think the melee damage on foot is definitely more useful. Then you have Dexterous or Endurance. Endurance gives you 4 hit points, so that can be useful to make yourself, more of a damage sponge. But again, like I've said before, having really good armor can substitute for low hit points. Dexterous gives you a 3% movement speed boost, and being able to move faster is one of the most useful things in the game. So I think Dexterous is a much better perk. Then we have a bunch without choices again, so let's just go through them. Power Kick says more kick damage. Definitely useful if you like kicking people. In good shape, your foot troops gain 2% more hit points. So again, that's just going to give your foot troops, give them some more hit points, make them a little stronger. Now, not so easy to kill. Furious Charge, your foot troops gain 10% more damage speed bonus. So by running through into them, they're going to get that 10% damage bonus for speed. Then Salt in the Wound, the player does extra damage at less than half hit points. So this one is a good one to pair with the Berserker one for a two-handed. So as your hit points are down below 50%, you're going to do more damage. So that's good. Unburdened, less penalty for overburden, so this is going to speed you up if you are carrying way too much crap. Peak Form, hit points increased by 10, just going to make you more of a damage sponge. Spartan, party food consumption and wage decreased by 5%, so that's going to make it easier to go on long campaigns because you won't run out of food as fast, and you won't spend as much money on your army. And then we have Mighty Blow. So your bashes and kicks knock enemies down. So that one's a good one. Your shield bashing people are kicking them while you're fighting, you're much more likely to actually knock them down and, be able to quickly kill them afterwards. So definitely a useful skill to go for. Lastly, we have Smithing, which, as you probably know, means smithing. This one is going to be used to make swords and other weapons. So let's go through these. As you can see, I've picked mostly on top, and I'll explain why as we go through. So you have Efficient Charcoal Maker. Character can use a more efficient method of charcoal production that produces 3 units of charcoal from 2 units of hardwood. And then you have Efficient Iron Maker, and that one character can produce crude iron more efficiently by obtaining 3 units of crude iron from 1 unit of iron ore. And now the reason I go with charcoal on this, and I would every time, is you need charcoal to do every single thing in smithing. But the thing about iron is, I've never needed to produce any crude iron by smelting iron ore. All I do is I take the weapons that I get out of combat in there and I smelt them. And I get all my raw resources that way. But you need charcoal for everything that you make, so it's definitely better to be better at making charcoal. Then we have Curious Smelter, which increases the rate of learning new part designs when smelting by 100%. And Steelmaker, so it says character can refine 2 units of iron into 1 unit of steel. Again, I don't do that. I don't refine metal to get it. I always just smelt it, so Curious Smelter is going to be good. And this is also going to help you learn new sword parts. So people always ask, like, how'd you get all those, parts unlocked? That's how. I go through the Curious Smelter perks. So then you have Curious Smith, which increases the rate of learning new part designs when smithing by 100%. So that's whenever you're making a new weapon, you're 100% more likely to learn new part designs. And then another Steelmaker one, again, I don't ever do that, so not useful to me. Experience Smith, character has a 10% chance to create a fine weapon if difficulty requirements are met. So this is that chance. So if the difficulty requirements show up on the side when you're putting a weapon together, and it has to match your level, and if it does here, you have a 10% chance to make it a fine weapon, which means it'll give it a small to medium damage or stat boost on various stats. So it's definitely useful. And the alternative is Steelmaker 3. Again, refining more units of steel, completely useless in my opinion. Next we have Practical Refiner, which the stamina spent for refining is halved, and Practical Smelter, so stamina spent for smelting is halved. Since I use Smelter to get my materials, smelting much more often than refining, smelting is the way to go. Controlled Smith immediately increases control by 1, and then you have Vigorous Smith immediately increases vigor by 1. This is going to come down to which one of those you want to increase. It generally comes down to playstyle. Do you need that extra one in vigor or in control? In this one, I went with control. Practical Smith, stamina spent for smithing is halved, and then you have Artisan Smith, trade penalty when selling smith weapons is halved. I went with this one because I primarily use smithing not as a way to make money, even though you can do it that way, but more as a way to make good weapons. So I wanted to level up faster and be able to process more stuff at a time. So practical smith makes more sense because you need stamina to do everything, and this way you can do that longer. Now this one makes sense if you want to use it specifically as a way to make money, because this is going to make it so you don't have to sell your weapons that you made for way less than they're worth. Next, you don't have a choice for this one. It's Mastersmith, so it says character has a 10% chance to create a masterwork weapon if difficulty requirements are met. So this is the same thing as the fine one. This is just going to, if you meet the level that it requires to make that sword, you have a 1 in 10 chance to create a masterwork weapon, which will give you a medium to large boost to various stats on the weapon. Next we have Enduring Smith, which immediately increases endurance by 1, or Fencer Smith, which immediately adds 1 focus point to one-handed and two-handed. So generally speaking, I would go with Fencer Smith because it gives you a focus point for 2 different areas, which is very useful. But in this one, I had already maxed out one- and two-handed before I even got to smithing, and so immediately increasing endurance by 1 was useful. So I went with that one. With Sharpened Edge, you have cut damage of crafted weapons increased by 2%, and with Sharpened Tip, you have thrust damage of crafted weapons increased by 2%. I like to go with Sharpened Edge because most of what I craft is swords, and I also usually craft them to maximize for slash damage because I use it on Cavalry a lot, and in person I prefer them as they're heavier, more damaging hits, generally speaking. So I like to go with Sharpened Edge over Sharpened Tip. Lastly, we have Legendary Smith, and it says character has a 5% chance to create a legendary weapon if difficulty requirements are met. This increases by 1% for every skill point beyond 300. So as you keep leveling up, you're more and more likely to get the legendary weapons, which are going to give you that large boost to various stats on the weapon as long as you meet the skill level. Plus, once you get up to 275, I don't think there's anything that you won't have the skill level to make. So as you keep leveling that up, you have more and more of a chance to create legendary weapons, so they're going to be some of the best weapons in the game. In fact, any legendary weapon you're able to smith is going to be one of the best weapons in the game. So that does it for the endurance attribute. I hope this was useful, but in any case, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching another Dare to Game video. If you liked this video, please leave a like and a comment. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you like my content and would like to support this channel, consider becoming a member today for as little as $1.99 a month. It makes a huge difference. But in any case, thanks for watching and have a nice day. I'll see you next time.